I was Hattie but Rico from Street Scores. I think it's time. After the two joint practices we had against the Ravens August 15th and 16th, I think it's time to discuss the 8 MVPs from those joint practices. So consider this somewhat of like a stock up, stock down type of thing, but more so focused on the 8 MVPs, the things I like the most coming from those joint practices as far as the Commanders go. It may be a player, maybe a position group, maybe a specific thing. It's really random. You'll see. I also have some extras at the end that I also want to talk about, some extra positives. They're not necessarily great enough to be classified as MVPs, but it's also some notable things where it's like, okay, that's good. That's really helpful. That should help us in the long run. And then I also have a list of worries. I have 5 worries that I also want to bring up, and you never know. Maybe some of these worries get fixed or cured before we even get to the regular season against the Arizona Cardinals, or maybe these are just problems that we will always have throughout the season. And also, did we win the joint practices? I know it's hard to like exactly determine and judge who won those 2 days in total, because it's not like anybody was keeping score. It's not even like the objective was to necessarily score the most points. It was who looked the best, especially when it became the starters versus starters. I would say the Commanders won. We're going to dive into why I think why, but before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm that subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the Commanders content. I'm working on a lot of the rookie film sessions. I still have a lot of rookie reports that I need to work on that are going to come out once news kind of stops coming out for the Commanders, because they're about to shut down practice after August 19th. Practice is about to be on complete lockdown. Barely any information coming out other than like injury updates and things like that, because at that point they're going to start installing the offense and really working on plays that they plan on using in games to win games. So they don't want us fans knowing, because if we know, then our future opponents know as well. So they're about to keep everything secretive, shut the whole thing down. So at that point, I have a lot of content to come out with during that period of time, from then all the way to when we play the Cardinals week 1. You can see the countdown on all of my thumbnails for that. So stay tuned for live streams. I'm live streaming this upcoming preseason game against the Ravens. Stay tuned for all of the content, man. And without further ado, let's get it.
You tell your family you can be a commander.
All right, so first of all, MVP number 1, Forbes is ready. He looked like our best corner already in those 2 joint practices. I thought, even as big of a Emmanuel Forbes fan that I am, I thought it was going to take until like maybe the first few weeks of the regular season for him to look at the point that he does. Like maybe even it would take more than his rookie year, because usually cornerbacks and quarterbacks have the hardest time adjusting to the NFL level. I mean, you could take an elite corner in college, an elite quarterback in college, and they're pretty much expected to struggle their first seasons or 2. That's just how it works for those positions more than any other position. Defensive linemen can come in and dominate day 1 like my boy Jalen Carter's doing. Linebackers, there's a little bit of a growth period, but for the most part, they can come in and ball out day 1 if they're truly that talented. Even safeties, wide receivers especially, if like Marvin Harrison Jr., y'all think he's going to come in and not ball out day 1? You think that Brock Bowers isn't going to come in and dominate day 1? Offensive linemen could come in and dominate day 1, or at the very least be really good. So I was really surprised that Forbes already looks this good. I'm not saying he's 100% complete. I'm not even saying he's necessarily a Pro Bowler yet, but we already have a really good cornerback group in my opinion. I feel like Kendall Fuller and Benjamin St-Juste are a really fine outside cornerback duo. Benjamin St-Juste literally locked up A.J. Brown when we played the Eagles that one time, and then he did pretty much as good of a job as you could do against a Justin Jefferson and some of the bigger, more elite receivers that we've gone against. Kendall Fuller, is some reason, him and Danny Johnson, once it hits November, they just completely change and they become way better players. So towards the second half of the season, Kendall Fuller looked like a really good CB2 at the very least. And then you bring in Emmanuel Forbes, and he hasn't even played his first regular season game, and he looks better than both of those guys. Now, granted, Benjamin St-Juste was hurt the first day, and then he actually practiced the second day and had a great day, even though Zay Flowers did juke him out of his socks one play. And then soon after that, Benjamin St-Juste locked him down in one-on-ones, and then he continued to lock pretty much everybody down in team drills, especially in the red zone. But Emmanuel Forbes was doing that too. He did a great job against Odell Beckham Jr. Odell Beckham got a couple of times on him, but for the most part, especially if Lamar Jackson underthrew it, Emmanuel Forbes would have enough makeup speed to go and bat that down anyway. So ultimately, I feel like Forbes even technically won the matchup against Odell. Even though more accurate passes from Lamar Jackson, it will probably be a little bit more even. And then Kendall Fuller had a bad first day getting cooked, and then he recovered and had a great second day. Emmanuel Forbes was the most consistent and most importantly available player out of our cornerback group, because man, your best ability is your availability, and a lot of people are worried about his availability coming out of the draft with him not having as much weight as people hoped. And I keep saying, man, he's literally like the Bryce Young of corners, man, because his only problem is his lack of size. And even then, he's 6'1" with really long arms, so it's not even length, it's literally just a weight issue. But if you're talking about traits, he's good to elite at everything that matters for a cornerback. Then he goes out there in that Browns game and makes a really impressive goal line run stop, a really good wrap-up tackle. That was amazing. So I feel like we could put all of the weight issues to rest, because Odell Beckham Jr. is a fast receiver, but he's also very physical, and the fact that Forbes was able to stay with him and cover him just as well as probably anybody could, that's very encouraging. And again, most importantly, my main point is that we're still only in August. This man hasn't even played a regular season game, and he already looks like our best corner of a cornerback group that's already good. And we're not talking about a cornerback group that was sorry last year. We added Emmanuel Forbes, and it's like, duh, he's the best one already. Nah, this is a good corner. I like Benjamin St-Juste a lot. I like Kendall Fuller too. And the fact that Emmanuel Forbes already, at the very least, looks better than those guys. We'll see what happens when we get into real games and teams game plan against Emmanuel Forbes, especially trying to abuse double moves on him, because that's how Odell Beckham Jr. was beating them, or at the very least getting some separation on him, even if he didn't flat out beat him. It was with double moves. Maybe we'll see if Emmanuel Forbes can handle that once we get into games. But as of right now, he looks like our best corner. So my most important thing from Emmanuel Forbes, he looks ready, and that's big time, especially from a first round pick, because you hope that he would be able to play early and often, and at the very least you would love for him to start. We'll see how this goes. Now next up, Howell is not only a QB1 in Washington, but also just flat out looks like a really good quarterback that's ready to lead a team as talented as ours to the playoffs. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up being considered Super Bowl contenders at some point in the season. It all lies on Howell's shoulders. Now we're going to talk about the rest of the team as we go through these MVPs. We're going to talk about the coaching staff, most importantly Eric Bieniemy. I feel like the supporting cast around Sam Howell is amazing. And it's literally like, if he just goes out there and does his thing, he doesn't even have to force things. Just work within the confines of Eric Bieniemy's offense and make sure everything goes smoothly, and then show your talent every now and then, your mobility, your strong arm, the ability to throw on the run, like things that most quarterbacks can't do. You bring that out occasionally. You shouldn't have to do it all of the time, because again, this team is talented and we should be able to work wonders. First of all, Sam Howell, I'm not saying he's better than Lamar Jackson. Do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that. This man has only started one regular season game. He's only played in 4 preseason games so far in his career. I mean, he hasn't been the starting quarterback for long. But day 2 of the joint practice against the Ravens, Sam Howell was obviously, at the very least, looked better than Lamar Jackson. He was better that day. At the very least, we can all objectively say that. Even Ravens reporters pointed that out. Sam Howell was really crisp and pretty much completing everything he wanted, short to intermediate range. He didn't take a lot of deep shots, but that's also because the Ravens did everything they could to prevent deep shots. So that's why underneath was open, and Sam Howell was like, all right, you'll give me that, I'll take it. I'm just gonna dice y'all up underneath. Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson yesterday, second day of joint practices, went, I believe somebody said, like a Ravens reporter, I think, said he went 11 of 26 throwing the ball. And now, like I talked about in my training camp breakdown yesterday, this could be a mix of either the Commanders defense is just that great and that much better than the Ravens defense. Lamar Jackson had to go against a better defense than Sam Howell had to go against. And also maybe Sam Howell was just more on point yesterday than Lamar Jackson was. It could be a mix of both. And I'm a big Lamar Jackson fan. I'm one of those guys that I hate that people keep talking about he's a running quarterback and all of that type of stuff. I hate it. So I actively root for him with a lot of passion. But Sam Howell objectively just looked better than him yesterday, point blank period. Again, I'm not giving him the crown. I'm not saying he's better than a past NFL MVP already. I'm not saying that at all. But it also supports my argument that Sam Howell's supporting cast is amazing. This receiver group, this offensive line, even looked really good that second day. They looked pretty good the first day, but that second day they looked really good, and you could argue they actually won the matchup against the Ravens starting defensive line, but we'll get to that at a certain point in this video. The supporting cast is amazing. I mean, again, I already said receivers, but like, this is arguably the best receiving group in the NFL. I feel like once they're able to go out there and be productive and put the stats to it, I think people will start talking about us having the best receiving core in the NFL, at least top 5. And I feel like we should have the best at the very least in the NFC East. I really do. Top to bottom, 1 through 6, I'm telling you, especially those top 3 and 4. I really do. So again, it just, I mean, either Sam Howell's great or the supporting cast is great, or maybe it's a mix of both. It has to be one of them for him to do better than Lamar Jackson. And it wasn't even necessarily close that second day. There's something there. So whether it's because it's him and you just isolate Sam Howell out of the offense and it's literally only him because the offense was working so smoothly, or if it's the supporting cast around him, or if it's both, either way, Sam Howell looks like he can lead this team with this same supporting cast to the playoffs. I'm telling you that now. Number 3, another reason why I feel like we're strong playoff contenders is because of Eric Bieniemy. And before we even get to the X's and O's, first of all, if anything, we won the joint practices overall, and he had a lot to do with that. You had Commanders and Ravens reporters saying that we were more physical than the Ravens, especially that second day. We were more prepared overall. We had stronger and quicker starts than the Ravens in both days. And we were more composed. So when it came to all of the fighting and stuff, we were the team that instead of just continuing to stay heated and getting off of our game, we stayed on our game and just got revenge on the field through our football play, rather than throwing more punches and more shoving and stuff like that. You saw Mark Andrews frustrated, getting locked up and stuff like that. That's why he body slammed somebody. You saw Duvernay body slam Emmanuel Forbes from behind because he was frustrated or whatever was going on. All of that type of stuff. So you could tell that the Ravens were frustrated, which means like that's an obvious sign you're in your feelings, you're probably losing. So, hey man, Eric Bieniemy had a lot to do with that because Ron Rivera's been here. Jack Del Rio's been here, and even though a lot of the great things we saw in these joint practices came from the defensive side of the ball, especially as far as being more physical than the Ravens, Eric Bieniemy is a lot of that. He's like the spirit of the team right now. He's the voice of the team. He's getting guys to keep it pushing, to stay upbeat. Shouts out to my boy Big Doug. I was on his stream yesterday. Make sure y'all go follow him because he's a fellow Commanders fan. Great interviews, great questions, great ideas, great points, and he's a fellow Georgia Bulldog fan, so you know I love that. He brought up a great point that the Commanders even have finished practices early this off season. Usually they reach the end of practice, feel like they didn't get through enough stuff and they weren't able to fix their issues and work on enough plays, enough ideas, certain personnel groups and things like that by the end of practice. Since Eric Bieniemy's been here, we've been working at such a fast tempo that we actually finish practice early sometimes. Like we literally have extra time left over, and we don't even need to meet that limit that the NFLPA set to where you have to stop practice at a certain point. The Commanders like, we're good. Like we got everything done that we needed. We're ahead of schedule. We're straight. We can go. I feel like Eric Bieniemy is a huge part of that, and at the very least, the majority of it. Because again, my point is, Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio have been here for a couple of years already. All of these changes that we're seeing, X's and O's wise, team tempo wise, being more physical, being more prepared, going into joint practices and things like that. All of that is new to this year. So scratch comparing us to the Ravens these past couple of days. How about comparing these Commanders to last year's Commanders, to the Washington football team and the Redskins as of late for the past few years, pretty much the majority of my lifetime, if not all of my lifetime. Again, I wasn't alive to see any of the Super Bowls. And Eric Bieniemy basically already has this team looking more prepared than they've looked in a very long time. That's the impact he's having. Before we even get to the X's and O's, before we even get to how he's making adjustments, and even in preseason games against the Browns, man, that man saw those first 2 drives with the offense line, specifically Andrew Wiley more than anybody else, just being a turnstile. He decided that 3rd drive, we're going to score a touchdown. So what we're going to do is we're going to get Sam Howell to roll out of the pocket more. So Andrew Wiley being a turnstile doesn't affect the offense as much. We mitigate that damage a little bit. We're also going to get Sam Howell to get the ball out of his hands quicker, make quicker reads, and just deliver the ball before Andrew Wiley even has a chance of getting destroyed. And then just a whole bunch of adjustments that, first of all, you don't typically see adjustments in Washington Commanders anything. Scott Turner, whoever it was, you just never really saw adjustments. And not only did we see adjustments, but in a preseason game, like we're making adjustments not only in a game like ever, but preseason. Like, that's crazy. So I'm very optimistic about Eric Bieniemy. And again, joint practice wise, how we were more physical, how we were more prepared, how everything just went so smoothly. We were able to pretty much complete passes whenever we wanted to, pick up first downs whenever we wanted to, score whenever we wanted to. A lot of that was Eric Bieniemy. A lot of that is Sam Howell as well, because Eric Bieniemy, the reason he's allowed to do certain things and try certain things is because of Sam Howell's talent, his mobility, his arm strength, ability to throw on the run accurately and things like that. He's improving as a guy that can scan the field, go through his progressions and get the ball out quickly, stuff like that. So Howell enables Eric Bieniemy to be the best him that he can be, and vice versa. Eric Bieniemy allows Sam Howell to be the best version he can be. I feel like those two working together are going to work wonders for this team. Number 4, defensive line, and this may be the biggest MVP of them all, which, I mean, nobody should be surprised. Our defensive line, I feel like, is the best in the NFL, and they went out there and looked like it. Again, you can ask Ravens reporters, go follow their Twitter accounts, look at their articles. Everybody agrees between the Ravens reporters and the Commanders reporters that the Commanders defensive line did whatever they wanted to. Whenever they wanted to get to Lamar Jackson, they did. And mind you, Chase Young never participated in joint practice. This is without Chase Young, what we were doing to a really good Ravens offensive line. They may not be a top 5, maybe not even top 10 offensive line, but they're at the very least an above average offensive line, a good one. And the fact that our defensive line literally did whatever they wanted to shows that this defensive line may have finally reached their peak and may be the best we've ever seen since we've been bringing in all of these first rounders with Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, and Chase Young. Even without Chase Young out there, they looked like they were in their best form. And then even against the run, I mean, that one play with Jonathan Allen was ridiculous, where he was in the backfield pretty much as soon as the ball was given to the running back from Lamar Jackson. He was already there to meet them. He almost could have taken the handoff if he wanted to. It was ridiculous, man. I'm telling you, man, this defensive line is about to be something serious. And like I've been saying, iron sharpens iron. The fact that this offensive line has been going against that defensive line every day, I'm telling you, when we get to the regular season and we're just law of averages going against defensive lines not as good, or at the very least not as talented as our D-line, because I feel like we have the best defensive line in football, it's going to feel easier to them. Maybe not easier, but less difficult at the very least. I'm not going to just act like our offensive line is just going to go through and dominate everybody just simply because they go against the best D-line in football. But I'm telling you, these regular season games are going to feel a little less difficult. I feel like it's the best way to word it. And that's how it should be. That's one big thing with Eric Bieniemy and a lot of the players complaining about, like, how he runs his practices, yelling at people, keeping the tempo up, asking the running backs to run all the way to the end zone, no matter how far the end zone is, every run, to just go ahead and have that ingrained in their brain. It doesn't matter if we're on our own 20-yard line. If you get tackled 8 yards, he's asking you to run the full 80 almost to get a touchdown. He's not playing. But at the same time, I feel like why Eric Bieniemy is so great for this, just to go back to point 3 real quick, practice should be harder than regular season games. If you make practice harder than regular season games, you get to regular season games and you're just having fun. And if anything, you feel like a sigh of relief. You have a weight off your shoulder. You can play smoother. You can play with more confidence. You're not running into things you've never seen before. If regular season games are easier and more fun than practice, you're doing your job, Eric Bieniemy. Thank you. And then leaving point number 4 from the D-line, sticking with the D-line kinda, to point number 5, Andre Jones's chances of making the roster and getting real minutes in the game have significantly increased. Even Ron Rivera talked about him in a press conference and said, wow, and then he had like a quote afterwards about him and stuff. Like, I forgot the exact quote, but I mean, this guy's literally looking like who we hoped Shaka Toney would be. Now, granted, it's very early and he was flashing in training camp, but he flashed the most against the Ravens. And when the lights are at their brightest and you're at your best, that's really significant and very noteworthy. Like, I mean, we don't really care exactly what you do. I mean, it doesn't hold as much weight, I would at the very least say, that if you're performing well or worse or whatever, when it's just a normal practice, we're chilling. But when it's high level of competition, high stakes, the lights are at their brightest, you perform your best, that's the type, I'd take that any day. Of course, we would want him to be great every day, no matter what's going on. But when the stakes were at the highest, he balled out. Now, granted, maybe that's just more of a compliment to the offensive line that Andre Jones was shining against our offensive line, but he wasn't just having dominant, great days and super flashing like he did against the Browns O-line, and especially like he did against the Ravens in joint practices. At a certain point, the second day, with Chase Young still out, he got a lot of starter minutes. They rotated F.A. Obada in there, Casey Toohill, and a few guys, but I think think Andre Jones was the first to get starting reps, and it looked like the defense didn't even skip a beat. He provides a lot of pass rushing upside, and like the point I was asking and making in my previous video, my training camp breakdown last night or whatever, is he like the steal of the draft? Is he our next Cameron Curl as far as being a 7th round steal? I mean, you never know. If Chris Paul starts at left guard, he may be another 7th round steal for us. Christian Holmes looked really good in that Browns preseason game and carried that momentum into the Ravens joint practices. Is that another 7th round steal? So Andre Jones right now leading the charge on 7th round steals if you're not including Cameron Curl right now, because he's surprising everybody. And literally when we drafted him, I was like, I see some talent, I see some upside, but he's not a freak athlete. He's not even as athletic as a Shaka Toney. So I'm not even sure if he'll make the 53-man roster. He'll probably just end up like a practice squad player. I like the talent. I didn't hate him as much as a lot of people, but I also wasn't a big fan of his. I'm not going to sit here and act like I expected Andre Jones to be this great at this point or this great ever in his career. KJ Henry is the guy with the crazy ceiling. He's the one that was a 5-star recruit, led Clemson in pressures even amongst that really good defensive line that had Brian Brzee and all of those guys, man. But Andre Jones was the guy that he's not as athletic. He doesn't have this crazy ceiling. But at the end of the day, he went out there, put in the work, and has gotten better and better each day, each practice. And now he's out there flashing. And again, my main point is, not only does it look like he'll make the 53-man roster at this point, which means he's taking somebody's spot, because I didn't have him in my original 53-man roster prediction that I did a couple of months ago. He's taking somebody's spot. I don't know who it is. So, man, I'm really excited about his. And then not only making the roster, but also I think he'll play real minutes as like a situational pass rusher. Again, the hopes that we have for Shaka Toney, Andre Jones is already showing that flash, and to be able to do it against a really good team in the Baltimore Ravens. Let's not forget that the Ravens are easily a playoff contender to most people, and the fact that we at the very least look as good as them, but you could even say we outplayed them over the course of the 2 days, especially the second day, and Andre Jones is a big reason for that. Now going on to the 6th MVP, my 6th point that I want to bring up, the wide receiver group top to bottom. We don't even have to talk about Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel, and even De'Ami Brown, who could pretty much get open whenever they wanted to. Whenever it was one-on-ones, those guys won almost every rep. They didn't win every rep, but boy, they made it look easy. They had defensive backs breakdancing with their route running, getting wide open for easy completions in the one-on-one drills. Then when we got the team drills, somebody was always open, if not multiple of them in the same play. But the reason I'm bringing up this wide receiver group right now is because this competition for those last 2 spots is ridiculous right now, man. Marcus Kemp juked a DB out of his socks in one-on-ones. He's also a strong special teams guy. He's probably our best special teams blocker. Again, I know I keep saying it, but go back and look at that Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl, that last return by the Chiefs where they were able to put the game away. Kadarius Toney had that great return. Look at Marcus Kemp having like 3 ridiculous blocks on that play. He blocked like 3 people and was like the main catalyst for why Kadarius Toney was able to make that return that he did to help put the game away for the Chiefs and win that Super Bowl. So, I mean, that's just a ridiculous niche and secret weapon that he has on his tool belt right there that nobody else has. He's also his size. He's 6'5", 6'6". Outside of the tight end group, him and Bryson Tremaine are the only receivers we have above 6'1". Bryson Tremaine and him are 6'5", 6'6" each. After that, the next tallest guy is 6'1". Again, outside of the tight end group. So he has a unique size to him as well. Kazmir Allen looks like our starting punt returner in my opinion, and then he's also juking linebackers out of their socks in the joint practices wide open. Sadly, he dropped an open pass after completely juking a linebacker out of his socks against the Ravens, but even other than that, he's been making plays and all in the training camp practices leading up to the joint practice where he's making amazing catches and things like that. He just had that one really bad drop where it was like, come on, dog, that was your moment to really shine. But other than that, I mean, he was balling out in the Browns preseason game, and he looks like our starting punt returner to me. Mitchell Tinsley catches everything. Jacoby Brissett had a really bad pass, an ill-advised pass where Mitchell Tinsley was pretty well covered. He still found a way through contact to kind of catch it with one arm while like keeping the guy off with the other. It was crazy. He was making amazing catches all throughout training camp. He had an amazing catch against the Browns. He looked like a starter amongst backups when he was out there with the backups when in the Browns preseason game. And that's what you got to do. If you're trying to escape this backup role and like make a roster spot, let alone try to actually actually get some meaningful minutes in regular season games, you have to look like a men amongst boys when you're out there with the backups. And Mitchell Tinsley did that against the Browns and looked really good against the Ravens as well. Then Byron Pringle, another ex-Chiefs guy, just like Marcus Kemp. That's the advantage those two guys have, the familiarity with the current offensive coordinator for the Commanders, Eric Bieniemy, and knowing the system and everything. Also, Byron Pringle is, Ron Rivera loves his positional flex, and he even pointed out the fact that when they're looking at the receiver group, they're looking at guys that can play multiple positions in the receiver group. Byron Pringle plays just as much in the slot and just as well in the slot as he does outside. He can do both. And then Dax Milne also has some versatility. Seems like he almost catches anything that comes towards him. He's a pretty decent route runner, but his only problem is that he's a pure slot. But he also was our starting punt returner all last season. So if Kazman Allen can't win that job, Dax Milne probably automatically gets a spot on this roster as our starting punt returner. So one of the spots is going to go to whoever our starting punt returner is, and that's between Dax Milne and Kazman Allen. And then after that, we have Marcus Kemp, Mitchell Tinsley, and Byron Pringle fighting for the last spot. This receiver depth is ridiculous. Everybody I just mentioned, I would take all of them over half the receivers we had on that 2020 roster with like Dontrell Inman and all of those guys. That was terrible. No, like literally, I would take Marcus Kemp, Kazman Allen, Mitchell Tinsley, Byron Pringle, Dax Milne. You may even throw Bryson Tremaine in there over half the receivers we had in 2020. I'm not gonna lie, and that really scares me because whoever ends up not making this team is probably going to end up going somewhere else and balling out. I'm really worried about that. That's one of my worries that we're going to get to later on in this video too. Number 7, my 7th MVP point that I want to bring up, Cameron Curl versus tight ends, man. He did a great job against Mark Andrews in these joint practices. Day one, Mark Andrews got him a couple of times, even with great coverage. Like, it was great coverage. What can Cameron Curl do even better than that? It was just a great throw from Lamar Jackson and a great catch from Mark Andrews a couple of times. But day two, it looked like from what I saw, Cameron Curl literally like shut him down. And that's where a lot of that frustration came from on day one, and why Mark Andrews was so frustrated and trying to fight everybody. And then Deron Payne pulled up and said, take your helmet off. And then Mark Andrews was like, nah, I don't want to fight no more. It's not fun anymore. Now it's getting serious. Now it's a real dog in front of me right now that actually wants to fight. And I'm not like that. But all the way back to my main point, man, Cameron Curl is different, dog. And we're going to need that. Somebody that could cover tight ends. Now, granted, we need more than that to be able to cover tight ends. We're going to need our Buffalo nickel to do that. So like Quan Martin, Percy Butler, even Khaleke Hudson is part of a rotation. Jamin Davis, just the linebackers, period. Cody Barton. We're going to need y'all. But I think it's going to be spearheaded by Cameron Curl, who looks like a much improved tight end eliminator, because boy, this NFC East alone, we're gonna have to play Darren Waller and Dallas Goedert twice a year. And then also you on this schedule, Kyle Pitts, Dawson Knox, and Dalton Kincaid on the same team, and even George Kittle later on in the season. Just to start, those are just a few tight ends that we have to cover this season. So Cameron Curl, we're gonna need that week in and week out big time, my boy. And now that the Commanders are trying to like move him to a pure strong safety spot, less Buffalo nickel, so he's gonna be in coverage a little bit more often, I'm hoping that he can continue to do what he did against Mark Andrews today throughout the entire season, because we are going to need it. And Mark Andrews, do not sleep on him. He's a really good tight end. Cameron Curl just defended him really well, and to be able to shut down a Mark Andrews, who some people feel like is one of the most consistent fantasy tight ends, at the very least one of the safest tight ends you can draft, and Cameron Curl pretty much took him away. That man, now I'm really excited about that. That's definitely one of the most notable things to come out of those joint practices. Also, number 8 in the final MVP, our offensive line's improvement, man. First of all, again, to reiterate, I feel like a lot of the hate that the offensive line got against the Browns was not deserved. First of all, the sack that on Sam Howell was more so on Sam Howell's fault. He should have delivered the ball to Brian Robinson. He probably would have gotten like 20, 30 yards off of it if he would have gotten it out of his hands sooner. And then also, I mean, if you go back and look at everybody individually, Andrew Wiley got beat pretty bad that day. I'm not going to lie, especially 2 times specifically, including that safety, boy. Really bad. But Samuel Cosmi was great. I mean, you could argue he didn't lose a rep passing protection wise or run blocking wise. Nick Gates was solid. Chris Paul flashed and was pretty solid. Charles Leno outside of like 2-3 snaps was really good. All the rest of them. So going from there, day one of joint practices, they were good, but I wouldn't necessarily say great. They held their own, even though the Oway guy was putting work on us, and he had like 2-3 would have been sacks for a real game scenario. The second day, boy, the offensive line dominated. And I love to see that improvement over the course of a day. Again, reporters from both sides, the Ravens and Commanders, were saying that the Commanders were more physical and that we won the battle of the trenches, especially on day 2. And that's both sides, not just the defensive line. They felt like, of course, our defensive line was better than the Ravens O-line. I mean, people should have expected that going into the joint practices. But in a very surprising way, our offensive line, people said, especially day 2, outplayed and were more physical than the Ravens defensive line. That's huge, man. The first day was good. The second day was great. And that makes me way more optimistic about what they're going to do going into this regular season, especially starting with the Arizona Cardinals, man. They're giving us like a little gimme game the first day so that we can get a little 1-0 start and have some confidence and momentum going into that difficult stretch of the schedule. But either way, just on top of that, to see our offensive line improving day to day from what they looked like a few weeks ago with absolutely no chemistry to what they look like now with being able to pick up twists and stunts and guys just winning their individual matchups, but most importantly the chemistry between each other to pick up blitzes and things like that. That's improving every day. And if you're improving every day, that means we could just be optimistic about what you're going to look like in the future, because if anything, you're only getting better, and that's big for us, man. This offensive line could potentially be our Achilles heel. I love our receiving group. I think it's one of the best in the NFL. I think at the very least it's the most underrated in the NFL. I think our tight end group is fairly underrated amongst the fan base, especially when healthy. I think Sam Howell's going to ball out. I think Eric Bieniemy is a genius. And then on the defensive side of the ball, our defensive line is the best in the NFL. I feel like our secondary has the talent and potential to be a top 5 secondary. I feel like the linebacker group, even though they're not the most talented, I think they're fast, and at the very least, being behind the best defensive line in football and in front of one of the top 5 secondaries in football makes your job easier. Just do the little things that you need to do right, and we should be straight. Literally, the offensive line is the only thing I'm even slightly worried about, and the fact that they looked that good in that second day against the Ravens, who have a pretty good defensive line, a pretty good defense overall. I'm very encouraged by what I saw. Now, moving on to the extras. These are just a little bit of extras that I wouldn't consider MVPs, but some notable things that I'm excited about. Defensive back depth. Man, we had Tariq Castro-Fields and Christian Holmes out here getting pass breakups left and right. Quan Martin looked way better than he looked in that Browns preseason game. Those guys stepped up. Our defensive back depth is insane. Percy Butler out here balling. Then also linebacker speed. Jamin Davis, Cody Barton, and Khaleke Hudson were flying around everywhere. Sometimes they looked a little lost, and like little misdirection got them a little bit. But when they were on it, they were super on it. And I even saw a play where Cody Barton completely tracked down a running back to the sideline, like was the first one to get there. Once he saw what the play was ahead of time and was being more proactive rather than reactive, the speed showed. And you already know Jamin Davis, if anything, his calling card, and the only real definitive positive that everybody gives him credit for is his athleticism. That's why we drafted him in the first round, because his potential from his athleticism, speed, that you just don't see a guy that size have. So our linebacker speed, I mean, I wouldn't say our linebacker group overall is great, but at the very least, we got a lot of speed. And remember, Khaleke Hudson is a safety converted to linebacker hybrid type of guy, so he's great in coverage. He has great speed sideline to sideline, so we got that. And then lastly, as far as some things I'm excited about, is overall team health. I mean, Chase Young didn't participate. Benjamin St. Juste missed the first day. Logan Thomas didn't participate. Sadiq Charles has that whole calf thing acting up and stuff like that. Whatever. But overall, our team is very healthy. I mean, if you just look at the Ravens in comparison, they had like 15 people not participate in that second day of practice. Marlon Humphrey is hurt, and he may even miss some time going into the regular season for them. I mean, we're nowhere near as bad as a lot of fans think we are. If you just think about how football works and relative to how healthy a team could be in a sport this dangerous, the Commanders are really as healthy as it gets. We really don't have anything crazy going on compared to what other teams have going on, with players getting carted off the field, lost for season type of stuff. We lost Armani Rogers for season. We lost that defensive lineman we signed within like 1 day for the season. But we don't have any bona fide starters, Pro Bowl players just missing significant time right now. So we need to be really excited and happy about the overall team health, especially since we're practicing harder, faster. We're working our guys way more than they used to be and worked, and they're still going out there and looking relatively healthy. So I'm excited about I think we're going to be in better game shape going into the regular season compared to past Commanders teams as well. So man, overall team health, stamina, all of that, I'm really excited. And then on to the worries. Cameron Cheeseman changing his technique worries me. I don't know why we're doing that. They're saying that he's making mistakes right now. For some reason, I don't know why you fix what's not broken, but apparently he's changing some of his long snap technique, and it hasn't been looking real smooth right now. And Ron Rivera addressed it in his press conference after joint practice day 2 yesterday, and he said, like, basically, hey man, we're trying to give you some breather room because we know you're changing technique, but there's a certain deadline where you need to have this figured out, or something's gonna happen. We're gonna have to replace you, or you're gonna have to go back to the old technique or something. Also, another worry, can we go ahead and give Kazmir Allen a starting punt return job already? Because I want to just go ahead and give him all of the punt return snaps. So far from what I'm seeing in clips and what I'm hearing in practice, it seems like he already kind of is. But can we just go ahead and crown him now so he can get all of the punt return snaps against the Ravens in the preseason game, and then also the final preseason game as well. All of the ones that we can get in practice and training camp practices when we're going against each other. Just go ahead and give him all of the reps so that he could be better prepared going into that Cardinals week 1 regular season game. I don't want him to go in there looking raw, looking like a rookie undrafted free agent. Let's just go ahead and announce that now. Also, I'm worried about the Commanders pulling a fast one, even though Kazmir Allen looks like the best punt returner right now. I'm worried about them potentially just siding with Dax Milne because they feel like he's a little bit safer, even though Kazmir Allen looks safe as well, but you just add explosion on top of that. So just go ahead and do that. Also, can we go ahead and decide who the starting offensive line is already? Because I want to keep building that chemistry. And right now, Sadiq Charles, they keep forcing him. And every time he's out there, he looks good. I'm not talking about Sadiq Charles' talent. I'm talking about his availability and his health. And at a certain point in that second day, the second joint practice against the Ravens, he was out there with the starters. His calf acted up a little bit. They had to sit him down. Now, granted, to the point that I made about overall team health, I feel like if we had a game today, Chase Young, Logan Thomas, Sadiq Charles, all of those guys will be healthy enough to play right now. Nothing to worry about. But I think they're just being overly cautious just in case to make sure nothing little turns into something big. But at the same time, dude, does anybody watching this video right now, are any of y'all confident in Sadiq Charles being able to start a full 17-game, 18-week season? If not, go ahead and start Chris Paul right now, because granted, Chris Paul is more of a mystery, but Sadiq Charles is more of a worry. We've seen his history. We've seen his past of him not being able to stay healthy for more than 2 games in a row, if that. And so it's just like, should we just go ahead and start Chris Paul now so he can go ahead and have that chemistry with Charles Leno to his left, Nick Gates to his right, and we can just go ahead and keep it pushing rather than potentially Sadiq Charles getting hurt mid-season, and then we have to hurry up and throw Chris Paul in there and expect him to gain that chemistry all of a sudden, rather than you can just give him the starting job now and he can go ahead and gain that chemistry throughout the rest of these training camp weeks, and then going into week 1 against the Arizona Cardinals, he's ready. And by the time we're in the middle of the season, the offensive line is completely gelling and good to go. And then also another worry, Cole Turner has some drops in that second day of joint practices, but at the same time, John Bates was catching everything. Complete opposite of what we saw in that Browns preseason game. I don't know if John Bates handed Cole Turner a football and then Space Jammed his powers away or something. I don't know what happened, but it's amazing to me that in that Browns preseason game, literally Cole Turner caught all 4 of his targets, all 4 of them, 4 for 4. And then John Bates couldn't catch the one wide open target he had. And then we get into this Ravens joint practice. Cole Turner's dropping passes. John Bates is catching everything. That's a worry, but at the same time, a little thing that I'm optimistic about, because if anything, I guess I'm being just glass half full. I love the fact that John Bates is becoming a more consistent catcher, and I think Cole Turner is just one of those guys that when it matters most, he's going to catch everything that he needs to catch. And I don't know, maybe he was just taking a day off, maybe he wasn't going full speed, I don't know, but I'm not too worried about Cole Turner dropping passes, because when it's mattered most, he seems like he catches them. And then lastly, my last worry, and I talked about this briefly while I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about the wide receiver group, I'm sincerely worried that one of these receivers, and it's a great problem to have, but it's still a problem nonetheless, I'm really worried about one of these wide receivers that doesn't end up making the team, goes to another team and balls out. I'm telling you, we don't keep Mitchell Tinsley. We don't keep Byron Pringle. We don't keep one of these guys. They're going to go somewhere else and make us regret not keeping them. I'm telling you right now, I'm really worried about that. It's sad that we can't just hide some of these receivers. I don't know if we're going to try to finesse it to where somebody gets a small cut on their leg, and we're gonna put them on IR, stash them away so nobody else can touch them. Just play sick, man. Just play sick, just act sick so we can keep you around or something like that. Because we did that with Samus Reyes 2 years ago. We did it with Curtis Hodges last year. Maybe we do that with one of the receivers this year if they have just even like a headache. One of them gets a headache, up IR for the rest of the year. No team can touch you. Come back next year. Maybe we'll have a spot ready for you. And Curtis Hodges last year, I mean, he went from they did that with him last year, and then now look, he's looking like he's gonna make the 53-man roster at tight end. So maybe we could sell that dream to one of these receivers, but I doubt it. I'm joking, really, but man, it's gonna really suck to see one of these receivers go. Because again, I'd take 5 or 6 receivers on this roster, on the back end of this receiver group, all fighting for those last 1 or 2 spots over half the receivers we had in 2020. It's ridiculous how much talent we have in the receiver group competing right now to make this 53-man roster. And I'm so sure and worried about the fact that one of these guys is going to go to another team and not only ball out, but also, I mean, when he's on another team, he has no allegiance to us, no loyalty to us. So you're like, yeah, this is what Eric Bieniemy likes to do. Like, what if one of them ends up on an opponent that we have to go against this season, and then they're just giving away the sauce? Now, granted, hopefully we haven't done too much installing of the offense. So, I mean, again, once we shut down practice and things like that, that's when Eric Bieniemy is really going to dive deep into his bag and start working on real play calling and designing plays, scheme, and stuff like that. So we haven't gotten into that yet. So if one of those guys is, the receivers are cut before we start to really dive into that, then we should be good as far as one of those guys being a double agent. We shouldn't have to worry about it that much, but you never know, man. And again, most importantly, I'm just afraid one of them is going to go somewhere and show out and become like a top 3 receiver on one of these other teams' depth charts where they couldn't even be one of our top 6. I would not be surprised. There's a lot of teams out here lacking wide receiver depth, and we're not, and that's just what it is, man. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. Of course, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get a notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure y'all stay tuned for all of the content, man. Y'all see I'm coming out with like 3, 4, 5 videos a day, man. Make sure y'all keep up. That's what it is. You got to keep up, man, for real. And then yeah, man, make sure y'all stay tuned. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors. Name is scrolling on the screen right now. I appreciate all the support. And again, let me know in the comment section how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Do you agree or disagree with any of my points? Are you as optimistic as I am? Do you have the same worries as me? Do you have the same MVPs as me? All of that. I'll catch y'all later. I'm out.